Well, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for keeping it NBS. And this particular time is an e-conference that is going to be talking about an aspect that is given, but it's something that has not worked well for Africa for a very long time, and we need to unleash that potential and ensure that it does come through to work for us, and that is the minerals that we are naturally endowed with. Not only Uganda, not only Africa, but Africa is definitely endowed as much. Now, this particular e-conference is brought to you by Minerals Africa Development Institution, or you can call it MADI, and the hashtag that you're going to use to be a part of this discussion is hashtag MADI Conference 2020, MADI E Conference 2020, where we're going to be discussing how Africa can actually be able to harness the potential of minerals to ensure that there is inclusion, to ensure that there is social development and transformation of Africa at large. Remember, the very reason as to why we did have the scramble and partition of Africa, it was definitely because of our endowment as a continent, the African continent. We know that these minerals do not have specific boundaries. That is why we sometimes have a dispute between a river or a lake being shared between various countries. But the scramble and partition of Africa brought about, the dotting, those lines that do exist. That's why you even get to see that the ethnicities that are shared between different countries of Africa. And that the reason because of that was minerals that we are going to be talking about today. And also because of the African Union around the year 2009, that's more than 10 years ago, did come up with the Africa Mining Vision, a policy framework that was created to ensure that Africa uses and utilizes its minerals strategically for its development and a broad-based inclusion. But unfortunately, a lot of this framework has not been put into action. And today, that's one of the reasons that we are going to be discussing here. What are the reasons? What needs to be done? What is the missing link? And of course, we clearly know that much of the mineral sector has been affected by some of them are human errors, some others are, man-made errors. Man-made errors, we've had civil wars across a number of African countries, which has derailed the activities in the mining sector. But we've also had some catastrophes. Some of them have been of nature. We've had a lot of flooding that has happened in some areas. We've had issues like pandemics and epidemics that have come through. Talk about HIV, talk about tuberculosis, talk about the most recent and the one that we're still facing, COVID-19. How can we be able, now that the entire global village or the entire world is thinking about jumping out of COVID-19, how do we ensure that as we get out of COVID-19 during this particular season, Africa can be able to harness its potential that it does have in the mineral sector to move forward, to go better from where it is today to the next level. And with me in studio, of course, we are going to be joined by a number of speakers from across the world to get to discuss this particular issue. And we have you online who will be sending in your questions and comments that we'll be responding to at a much later stage. With me in studio is Dr. Frank Mujenyi, the founder and chairman and the board of the Minerals Africa Development Institute. Thank you so much, Mr. Mujenyi, for joining us.
Thanks, Mildred, for having me, and welcome all speakers and all the listeners into this conference.
I just cannot wait for this particular discussion. We've talked about, the president has continuously reminded us of the vast mineral wealth that we do have, but we keep asking ourselves, why aren't we using it? So we will be discussing that. I'm pretty much interested. Mr. Vincent Kedi, who is the Assistant Commissioner Licensing, and that is the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development of Uganda. I can definitely attest that we are wealthy in regard to minerals, right?
Thank you very much, Mildred. Thank you for having me. Yes, indeed, we have enough minerals in the country, a lot of them.
Okay.
And this is an opportunity for us to unlock their full potential.
Okay.
You're most welcome, listeners. We hope that you have a very fulfilling experience in this discussion.
Yeah, I know. It will definitely be very fulfilling. And Dr. Jennifer Hinton, who is the Uganda country head at JVOS Mining Limited. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
I will start off with Mr. Kedi, particularly. The reason why we are having this discussion within Uganda. Is it true that we are endowed in terms of minerals? Just about what kind of minerals do we have that you can talk about offhand, and how are we performing, first of all?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mildred. Yeah, indeed, Uganda is blessed with a lot of mineral resources. we categorize this into largely three categories. One of them is the metallic minerals, the likes of gold, the likes of copper, iron, zinc, and so forth. The list is endless. We have almost over 40 in that category of metallics alone. Then you come to industrial minerals. These are, you talk about phosphate, limestone, marble, and so forth. Even in this category, we have over 20 categories of such minerals. And then we have the final category being the precious ones. The precious ones, we talk about this tourmaline and so on, the ones we use for making ornaments and so forth. In that category, also we have about 10 of them. So we can talk about over 90 categories of minerals that are possessed in the country. But the major ones that we know, of course, you know, gold mining is occurring everywhere around the country. We have tin, tungsten, and tantalite in Western Uganda largely. We have marble and these industrial minerals across the country. We have stone products, which are also industrial in nature. The likes of aggregates and so forth are being mined across the country. Even now, we are talking about new mineral categories, development minerals. The likes of sand, clay, marram, and stone, which are commonly used for building purpose. All these are termed as minerals in the context of Africa.
Okay, let me get to Mr. Mjenyi. Looking at Africa, and I want us to look at the pre and now, we can't say post-COVID, but we're still in the COVID time, but we will definitely find a cure for COVID or a vaccine. That's why we want to say post-COVID. What does the African mineral sector look like? And what do we want it to be like after COVID? Because I want to believe that this is a period for us to, it's like a pendulum bob, that this is a time for us to push forward and jump into our next move. So where have we been, where are we, and where do we want to head as Africa in the mineral sector?
Thanks, Mildred. Thanks for the viewers and the participants all over the world. We have almost 200 participants from almost 50 countries. Let me start opening my speech by saying that from what you have alluded to, that Africa is endowed. But let me take Africa back in thousands of years. And I would just want to use two examples to set the stage. Two examples of two men, one from Africa, one from Europe. The one from Africa is the one probably less known, Mansa Musa, who was the emperor of Mali, who in 1324 trekked all the way from Mali to Mecca on a pilgrimage, carrying almost 30 tons of gold. 21 tons of that was in gold bars, which means there was actually value addition at that time. And the rest was in dust. He had over 60,000 men, 12,000 slaves carrying all that, plus 80 horses, camels. So that's how Africa has been trading, globalizing for the last 1,000 years. The next man in history is what you have alluded to, is Ottoman von Bismarck, who convened a Berlin conference in 1864 that put dotted lines on the African map that shaped
lines and rulers. And someone said it's a ruler and a pencil.
They say it was a 5-foot map in which they put dotted lines, and no African was present on that in that meeting. And the outcome is what has shaped Africa in terms of its development. It's still with us. It's not the dotted lines that form the countries that we have, but the interests of the 12 countries of Europe that was attending that meeting was not for the people of Africa, but was for resources. One country which is still having problems in development is DRC, the current DRC. It was handed as a property to King Leopold and later on to Belgium. So we see that we have been, as Africa, our relationships with the rest of the world has been because of resources. Our future relationships with the world is because of resources. And the development and our sustainable structural transformation of Africa will be because of our resources. So when you ask me what has been happening is that Africa has not benefited even since after our independences, the last 60, 50 years. It's just because we all look at minerals as sovereign. We look at minerals not as having no borders, like you said earlier on. So our policies, our mineral resource regulations and legal regimes haven't spoken into how best we manage our resources in order to benefit from them.
Well, that's a very interesting background, and we'll definitely be getting back to it. I want to come to you, Jennifer. Looking at our mining, because I know there is a bit of mining that is going on. It could be artisanal, it could be, advanced. Where are we right now, and what are the missing links?
In Uganda?
Yeah, in Uganda, and then as Africa as a whole.
Well, in Uganda, as most Ugandans know, there is quite a bit of artisanal mining going on. And there is a history of large-scale mining through Kalembe. what it takes to take these mineral occurrences, all this potential, and turn it into modern mining, transform into industrial large-scale mining like we have in South Africa, is a lot of exploration. So attracting investors to explore in different countries, not just Africa, not just Uganda, but other countries in Africa, means attracting companies to come here and actually do all the studies, all of the research, all the science, which takes quite a few years to go from a mineral occurrence into economically viable mine. Typically, internationally, this takes 6 to 10 years of just research, really, research and studies. And it's a very high-risk investment. As we mentioned yesterday, about 1 in 5,000 projects is successful, leads to discovery. And so attracting people willing to risk that money is a big issue. As I mentioned when we were discussing yesterday, about 12% of exploration investment in the world globally in 2019 came to Africa, the 54 countries in Africa. By comparison, about almost 30% went to 6 countries in South and Central America. So we need to think about how we can attract companies to come and discover these deposits and actually see the continent's real mineral potential and transform that potential into genuine wealth.
You've clearly pointed out one of the fears for many investors that could be coming through, and that is having to risk. It's a risk, definitely, and in every business there is always a risk, to risk to come and invest that money. What does Africa need to do to ensure that the risk is worth it?
Well, reducing the risk. We already have big commodity price risks. The price of minerals goes up and down globally. We have big market risks. I think we'll talk about COVID in a few minutes and how that's affected investment globally and in Africa. So reducing the risk. And so I love Uganda. I've been living here 15 years. My dream is actually to discover and develop a big mine, employ a lot of people, benefit communities, benefit the country. But international companies look at different countries. They compare Ecuador and Peru with Malawi and Namibia. They look at Mongolia in Asia. And they look at the comparable risks. So there's political risk. What's the risk of a change in governments, changing all the laws, and maybe even canceling mining licenses after you've made that investment? What's the conflict or corruption risk? These are some issues that emerge, for instance, in DRC. What's the risk of expropriation? Imagine investing in any business for 10, 20 years, and the government decides, no, we want this, and they cancel. What's the risk with the legal and regulatory framework is actually a really big one. And one of the first areas that companies look at when they're evaluating a country, does this regulatory framework, this legal framework, provide predictability, which helps reduce the risk? Is it fair? Is it fair to government? Is it fair to people? Is it fair to companies? And is it competitive compared to other countries? So anything countries can do can reduce the risk. The other big issue is understanding the mineral potential. Countries such as Tanzania, South Africa, Ghana already have a large number of industrial mines, so you know there's potential. You know, the best place to find a copper mine is next to an existing copper mine. So that potential is proven. Other countries where you have potential in terms of promising geology and a large number of mineral occurrences, for instance, Uganda, the geological surveys play a key role. Uganda is an excellent example of having a lot of data online, a lot of data in their libraries going back, 100 years, celebrating 100 years now. And that's something that companies would look at because it helps you really understand the geologic risk in the area. So these are issues that companies look at. Internationally and domestically too. I have a lot of friends in Uganda with Ugandan mining companies and mineral exploration companies, and they also are constantly looking at risks in mining compared to, say, forestry, agriculture, other sectors when they make decisions.
All right, Vincent, I want to come to you, and in the context of Uganda, you talked about having over 90 minerals that we're blessed with, but the question is, at which point are we? Because Jennifer has talked about even the research itself taking a very long period of time, bring in the risk that later on could result into an investment. Where do we stand, and what are our key, positives that could actually attract more and more people to come and mine the minerals that we do have, which would later on translate into the revenues and the development that is much needed?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mildred. Now, in regard to where we are now presently, as we alluded to earlier, that Uganda has enormous mineral potential. Now, one of the key things that you have to know is that the policy framework provides that these minerals are held in trust by the government of Uganda on behalf of the people of Uganda. So the state owns the minerals. Now, when the state owns the minerals, to attract these investors, you need to acquire what they call basic geological information. Now, this is in regard to, it can be geological information, it can be geophysical, geochemical, and mineral resource information. So when you acquire this information, you package it. So over the years, the Geological Survey has been packaging this information for investment promotion. So we have been able to attract most of these investors into the country. So we have foreign investors like Dr. Jennifer here and many others who have come into the country because of the information that we collected. It is basic in nature, like she said. They have to invest more into determining how deep it is, and that's what's going on. Most of these investors are going into doing further exploration. Another thing that we also have witnessed is that in Africa, much as we attract these investments, in many cases, Africa does not actually benefit from its resources, largely because of our policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks, which allow for these people to come in and they are able to exploit the loopholes within our frameworks and actually reap a lot of profits and go back. And in the end, Africans don't actually benefit from their resources. This is a key topic that we need to discuss. Now, where we are at the moment is we are actually reviewing some of these laws to make sure that just like the African Union Commission is promoting under the African Mining Vision, we say let us have a fair share of our own resources. So fair share means you come, we give you a very conducive environment to invest.
Thank you.
We give you better policies, including some incentives. For example, you are able to import some of the equipment at a zero-rated tax rate, and then you're also able to actually recover mostly all your costs during the exploration stage. So when you start mining, we assume that when you actually mine, we expect you to first recover your cost. Then at the end of the day, we say, come on, let us have a fair share. You have to accrue returns on your investment, but at the same time, the state should also accrue benefits because they own the resource. So that's the stage where we are at. So we have investors investing in the country. We also have policy frameworks changing. We actually have a new mining bill, which tries to bring in that aspect, say, let's have a fair share.
So would I be right to say we're at negotiation stage with whoever wants to invest in the mining sector?
I would actually say we are at the transformative state.
Okay.
We are saying we have the investor, the investors are beginning to do the work. But we are saying with the current framework, the country is likely not to benefit much. So we are saying it has actually transformed this so that in the end, we all benefit. Everybody benefits. The investor benefits, but at the same time, the country also benefits from these resources.
Okay. Coming back to you, Mr. Mjenyi, like Vincent has said, there is mining in Africa that is existent, whether it's artisanal, whether it's at industrial level. But like Vincent has said, a lot of the money that Africa would have been getting actually goes back to the investors. We are talking about profit repatriation. What are we not doing right as Africa that even the share that we're supposed to be getting, we sometimes don't get, or we get less than we should?
Oh, thank you. What we do wrong in Africa is because we think on revenue maximization. So countries are attracting investments, foreign direct investment, to maximize revenue, but not optimize value along the value chain. So you are calling in a company to come in and extract your minerals, pay you some royalties and some corporate tax. In some cases, that corporate tax is based on the profits they are made, but the profits will be based on the expenditure. And in most cases, most of the expenditure in these companies are what we call, transfer pricing. You don't know what they're doing. So someone comes and says, I made profit of 10 million, but there is no way you would approve that actually that company made profits of more than 100 million. So we don't know because we attract investment for, royalties, corporate tax to maximize revenues, not optimize value, not create wealth, not create jobs for the young people, not to ensure that the minerals are value added in Africa, not to ensure that minerals we can trade in products. KD Vincent, when in his introduction said Uganda is full of minerals, but there is also a mineral because within the definition of mineral resources, petroleum is also a mineral. It's solid, liquid, and gas. Now, after of petrol, you can have over 5 products, byproducts that you get if you refine it in your country. If you refine any other mineral, you are creating jobs. So by Africa focusing on mining policies and legal regimes and regulatory frameworks for maximizing revenue rather than optimizing value to create more jobs, more wealth for the people, then we are still in that quagmire. Unfortunately, again, because we have still those dotted lines, countries in Africa compete for that investment. So they will put policies which are not harmonized at the sub-regional level or continental level. So you'll find Uganda is trying to attract investment, so they lower their taxes, they lower their royalties to attract investment. They'll give so much incentives, that when the companies come to invest in your economy, the incentives that you have given cannot allow you to benefit. And sometimes the commodity prices at the continent, at the global level, are very few, are very low. So you negotiate. They say, oh, we are going to invest for a long term, and we are not sure how we'll manage your risk because next government may change policies. So we need a lot of incentives. And we offer those incentives without actually taking into account that if the price of oil or gold or anything is low today, in the next 5 years it could be higher, even if you want to export your commodities. So the negotiations on contracts that Vincent has said, they have a lot of lacunas and loopholes that they allow companies to come in and invest. In the end, there is a lot of investment that has been coming on Africa. Little has been transmitted through poverty reduction, through development, through industrialization, through infrastructure development, and so forth. So that's the challenge we have.
Vincent, maybe if I come back to you before I go to Jennifer, what are some of those loopholes you think are existent? And do we have the capacity as Uganda, as Africa, to ensure that we can close the gap? Because here is a commodity, here is the person bringing in the money. You don't have the money to be able to exploit it. That means even if you stayed with it, it will still add no value for you. And here is a person who is looking at some of the loopholes that you're talking about and will exploit them, give you the money that you may need. But also, Vincent, I mean, Mr. Mjenyi is already saying it's not all about the money. So let's zero down on some of the loopholes that we are having. And do we have the potential to actually seal them and have a fair deal, a win-win situation for both the person who is coming in to invest, but also us who do own these minerals?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mildred. I think the biggest loophole that we have as a continent, as Africa, is our negotiating capabilities.
Thank you.
Our contract negotiation skills. So we invite the investors. Actually, investors in Africa, several investors in Africa, and they've invested, rightly so. But when it comes to negotiating what each gets, who gets what, the investor in the end exploits our loopholes in our system. The biggest loophole, again, is what was alluded to by Frank earlier. I will call it transfer pricing, but I want to give it a broader term. It's called base erosion and profit shifting. So these investors are very smart. They come, they load themselves with debt and so forth. So in the end, the outlook is they are not making as much as you think they should. But actually they are, because they're using their own subsidiaries elsewhere to lend to them at higher interest rates. So in the end, they have more expenses in the country, and we are not able to even somebody says he's not making profit. We want to share in the profit. But they're saying they're not making profit. So in the end, there's nothing that accrues to the state. So that once we plug that, now we're trying to build our own capacity as Africans to be able to actually negotiate these contracts, so that those and plug those loopholes in the law that will actually eliminate transfer pricing.
Are you insinuating that in the negotiation that has been going on in the past, we've not had a bigger stake as Africa to negotiate for our very own selves?
I agree with you. Indeed, it has been the case. Africans have always actually negotiated properly, but they not participate. You know, there's you negotiating and allow somebody to run in a vacuum. For example, assuming you have a company and we've negotiated a contract, and I leave you to participate alone. You know, I give you the space you need.
I just tell you this is what I want and
Precisely.
negotiate that. Okay.
Because I'm not participating with you. So increasingly, African countries have adopted a mechanism or a contract mechanism that allows them to participate in the mining venture so that they sit with you in the same boardroom. And when you take a decision, they're able to monitor the impact of that decision on how to optimize revenues for the country. Another important thing that I want to talk about that Frank earlier alluded to was that many African governments try to focus on maximizing revenue rather than optimizing it. So there's this aspect of value addition. These minerals, when they go out of the continent in raw form, they tend to attract less because you only get a royalty, a right of ownership. But if you require these companies, now this is a new policy that Africans are trying to actually adapt, that value addition must be done in the continent. That way we're able to get economies of scale which are so much bigger, and we shall be able to realize and unlock the potential that this sector offers.
Okay, coming back to you, Jennifer. We know that Africa was dotted. We got a ruler somewhere, a pencil. We all probably weren't even existent by that time. And we clearly know that these minerals do not have borders. So you will be having maybe iron that crosses through Uganda and Kenya. But when it comes to mining and exploring, there will be a dispute between Uganda and Kenya on who owns what chunk of land. The same case that we've had with Mijingo Island. One says, I own the island, you own the water. I own this. So how can Africa work together, especially countries that have cross-cutting minerals, to ensure that they all can gain together without having these disputes that could disadvantage them as a whole?
Well, this example is fairly rare, not unheard of.
Okay.
But typically in terms of how countries can benefit with that situation, where you have a number of mines on one side of a border, another on the other, it actually speaks directly to looking to the future and moving towards industrialization on the continent. What Keddy Vincent was saying about value addition, that fundamentally hinges on a number of things coming into place. The days of having one mine and one smelter are gone, for instance. Smelters and refineries are massive, and they may need to be fed by 5 mines, 10 mines, 20 mines for maybe 50 years, with different mines coming on stream and others going out. And that, in a lot of countries, means that countries do need to work together. So if you're looking at, say, smelting nickel, you may need to source from 3 different countries, which requires cooperation. Maybe an analogy would be you can't have one mango tree and one mango juice factory. It's not going to be economic. You won't sell your juice box that sells at 7,000 shillings for 70,000 shillings. You won't make money. So these things are big, and this is why it's essential that we start thinking, at the very least, regionally, not just in terms of production volumes, but in terms of transport corridors, in terms of inputs and supply of materials. There's a lot of discussion now about what can be produced in country and on the continent that's currently being produced outside of the continent. And I think these discussions are important about different countries and how they can cooperate if we really want to optimize and move in that direction.
Okay. Well, we're in the COVID period. We're yet to say post-COVID. We're still in the COVID season. How has Africa been affected, the mineral sector, and how can we take advantage of this time to probably do a soul searching and say post-COVID, this is where we want to be?
I think it's important to have a vision post-COVID, but it also means that right now there are things happening that we have to address to, in some cases, for some companies, whether they're domestic companies or international companies, they're looking actually at surviving COVID. And this includes small, medium enterprises that provide goods and services to mines now, or exploration companies. Right now we're looking at a trajectory in Africa. We're at over 800,000 cases and I think 8,000 deaths, and it's still on the increase. So what has happened is about 61 operations, large operations in Africa are currently affected directly by COVID in terms of shutdown and closures of mines, either due to lockdowns or safety purposes, or due to reduced global demand. By all accounts, we're facing a global recession. It may take 2 to 3 years to recover, and for markets to recover, including those markets that finance the mining sector and exploration. So it's going to take some time.
Okay.
But we have shutdowns, we have layoffs, we have mines on care and maintenance. And what we see, South Africa, for example, which tragically for everyone is being extremely hard hit right now, is facing, it's got the largest number of interrupted operations of any country in the world. And that means all the people that rely on it are being severely impacted.
Severely impacted. We'll also be looking at whether there is an opportunity from COVID-19. But as we do continue with a panel discussion right here in studio, like we did say, and Mr. Frank Mujenyi here did highlight, it's not a conversation in Uganda, it's a conversation across the world. And now we want to get joined by Isabella Ramdu, who is the Senior Associate and Development Economist at IGF. Remember, in our pre-discussion here, we've talked about adding value to these minerals. How is Africa faring in value addition to the minerals that are mined right here? Isabel, I'll give you about 5 minutes or less than that to engage us in that particular discussion.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And first of all, let me thank all of you for this initiative and having this further discussion. I think a simple answer to your question is not well enough. Most of our countries, and Frank has mentioned it in his initial comment, most of our countries continue to export minerals, metals in their raw form, with just the first stage of transformation done at home, that is, produce some concentrate by separating the ore from the soil, then we export, and that's it, basta. What does that mean? It means that we're exporting the most lucrative part of our business, that is value, together with our jobs, together with our industries, and together with our wealth. It also means that we are perpetuating a model that is completely stale and that has failed, let's say it, which is founded on chronic dependency on processed commodity production and exports. We are not supporting our own industrial tissue, we're helping other nations to grow rich. But anyone knows that to move our economies to the next level of development, there's no other pathway than industrialization. That's no-brainer, right? No country in the world, I think, has developed without industries. And even if globalization has changed a little bit the rules of the game, bottom line is that you need to create wealth to grow rich, and there's no miracle solution to development. So can we use, or should we use our mineral wealth to trigger industrial development? Having minerals in themselves, I think, is not sufficient, but it's certainly a great advantage. And as others have mentioned in the previous section, African countries are richly endowed with all sorts of minerals, but we have not managed to maximize them. Many of those resources are absolutely strategic for the fabrication of objects of our daily life. In fact, we don't really realize how ubiquitous the use of mineral resources are in our life. Right from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to bed, just think about what is contained in your toothpaste, in your light bulbs, in your houseware, in your car, your electronic devices, even in the food we eat. There is a saying that goes, if it was not grown, it was probably mine, and that's absolutely true for everything we use. There is a study that was conducted. This is really interesting in terms of figures. A study was conducted in the US looking at an average American. And the study says that throughout the whole lifetime of an average American, the person will need about 2 million kilograms of minerals, metals, and fuel. Now, that's 350,000 people. Now think about our own continent with close to 1 billion people, and what does that mean in terms of the minerals that we would need to cater for construction, for infrastructure, and for consumption as the middle class rise. Therefore, the demand for those minerals is really exponential, and none of those is consumed in raw forms. So you can imagine what the potential is from the industrial perspective. I just wanted to mention 3 key areas where I really think mineral sector can support industrialization. First, that was mentioned also by Frank. I think it's really important that we develop very strong and complex. So to me, the second area which is really important is the fact that the mining industry itself is a huge market for local industries. It can be a springboard for goods and services provided by local manufacturers. If just to give you an order of scale, an average large-scale mining company devotes about 2/3 of its annual expenditure to procurement, be it capital or operational, that is recurrent spending, 2/3. compared to just 20% in payments of taxes. So you can see really the difference in what goods and services provide as a market for local companies. But unfortunately, today what we observe is that a very small portion of that goes to local manufacturers, and the biggest ticket items are imported. And this is for a host of reasons, and one of them is because incentives and the regulatory framework that we have is
Isabel?
to support resilient local supply chain. I think a third issue I wanted to mention
Isabel?
here before concluding is to say that there are other spillovers that can benefit an economy at large. Countries have to also be able to
Isabel?
huge infrastructure facilities that the mining companies bring from this sector, sharing transport infrastructure, energy, internet connectivity, for example, really be a game changer to disenclave mining communities and enable towns and villages to access markets. Let me conclude by saying a couple of things here. None of this is easy to do, but for successful implementation, ultimately what matters is that government is able to plan very strategically about the development path. All the countries that managed to use their mineral resources effectively had a combination of policies, including effective local policies. And that has to be grounded on evidence-based market analysis. Secondly, supporting private
Isabel?
and making sure that supply chains are...
Well, Isabel, I wonder whether you are able to hear me. Isabel, well, we were receiving an echo from your side. I think there is a bit of audio control that you need to be getting. I didn't get your last 2 points, actually. If you could kindly repeat those, but we were getting an echo from you. But please go ahead and wrap up in the next 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah, I was just saying, I don't know where it cut, but I was saying the first issue I raised was the importance of making sure that you maximize the benefits downstream and you add value to your minerals.
Okay.
The second area, which is absolutely important and should not be neglected, is the fact that the mining sector itself is a large market for local companies, and it is a springboard to develop supply chains. And I was saying that 2/3 of the annual expenditure of a company actually goes to procurement of goods and services. Only 20% goes to taxes. So you can imagine how much leakages you're leaving if those are not being capitalized locally. And unfortunately, a lot of that is being imported. The biggest ticket item, at least, are being imported. And I think one of the things that should be done is to make sure that we...
in the next 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah. So just to conclude here,
but I was saying the first issue I raised was
there is also an echo now.
that you maximize the benefits downstream and you add
All right, Isabel.
The second area.
Well, it's quite sad that we did lose you again. I'll give you just 1 more minute to wind up on your last issue. We got the 2 main issues that you talked about, but you had said the 3, the very last one in 1 minute.
The last one was that we have to make sure that we capitalize on the infrastructure facilities and energy and internet connectivity, because this can really be a game changer to disenclave mining communities. I wanted just to add 2 things that I think in terms of moving forward and policy is really important. One is that you need, over and above having good local content policies that are grounded on economic analysis, you absolutely need to make sure that the ecosystem around supply chain development is right. That is, we have to give red carpet to our industry, not red tapes. And the 2 other things that are really important is to make sure that we provide a conducive ecosystem for innovation and research and development, because that is what drives up value in the production chain. If we don't do this, we don't really make sure that we build innovation and R&D locally, we will continue to sell cheap. And the third thing is competencies and skills, and make sure that we build the skills in science, technology, maths, engineering, etc., because this is what drives innovation.
All right, thank you very much, Isabel Ramdou. I know that later on we were able to get all your 3 points that you did particularly pay attention to. Thank you so much. And we'll now move on to Daniel Franks, who is the program lead governance and leadership in mining at the University of Queensland in Australia. And remember, while Vincent right here was talking about the types of minerals, he talks about the metallics, he talked about the industrial minerals, he talked about the precious stones, but also development minerals here that he talked about, like sandstone in Uganda. And we would like to hear from you, Frank. Daniel, we would like to know what's the role of these development minerals in the industrial development of Africa's industrial sector, of course. What do we exactly need to be doing as Africa to get the very best out of these development minerals?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Daniel? I'll give you about 5 minutes or less than that, if you could be able to wind up in a short time.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
All right.
Fantastic.
Daniel, are you able to get me?
Yes, I think I can hear you. So most people, when they think about the mining industry, they'll think about commodities like gold, silver, iron ore, coal. These are commodities that are exported from the developing world to the developed world, the already developed world. They're important for the generation of export revenue, and they're important for foreign direct investment, but they don't contribute as significantly to the nation building at home. And in fact, they're also a minority of the global mining industry. To give you an example, if you think of gold, the total amount of gold that's been mined and produced by humans in all of human history would fit into just 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. When you then contrast that with sand and aggregate, the yearly amount of aggregate and sand that is produced would not fit into 10 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. In total, metals make up just 2.8% of the global commodity production, whereas industrial minerals and construction materials make up something in the vicinity of 84%. So it's a huge discrepancy there. Importantly, these commodities, industrial minerals and construction materials, which include things like sand, cement, limestone, gypsum, salt, they're really important for the domestic development of nations, and they contribute to the building of houses and roads and bridges, and they've been neglected in policy settings, neglected in development debates, neglected in terms of involving that sector in the formal economy. Most of those minerals contribute to the domestic development, and that's why we call them development minerals. They're predominantly produced by small and medium-sized enterprises, informal parts of the economy and the market. And I guess the important thing is to try and bring that informal part of the market into the formal part of the economy so that we can maximise their use for the structural transformation of economies. Let me give you an example of Uganda. So directly, Uganda would employ 390,000 people in the development minerals sector. And if that part of the sector were introduced into the official development statistics and economic statistics of Uganda, it would increase Uganda's GDP by a very significant part of the economy, but also one that has been neglected and not part of the formal part of the economy. Now, the African Union's call on member states to prioritise development minerals, and by prioritising, they mean focus some attention on the policy settings, have legislation and law that applies to the small-scale miners and artisanal miners that are involved in mining and development minerals, and support them contribute to value chains and leading to what Isabel's been talking about in terms of the industrialisation of Africa and countries in Africa. UNDP has also been involved in this space and working with lots of governments, including Uganda, to capacity build small-scale miners, to strengthen value chains, to work on the occupational health and safety and environmental and social and income aspect of the mining of these minerals. I guess what we need is some more focus and priority on what is essentially a neglected part of the mineral sector.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel. Well, very shocking revelations that are coming through right there. But maybe just before I let you go, what is Africa doing right or wrong that needs to be amended? With regard to development minerals.
There is a very large number of artisanal small-scale miners working in the development mineral sector in Africa, in fact, in every part of the world. The mining of construction materials and industrial minerals is important for every country. It's not just the economies that traditionally think of themselves as mining economies. In our kind of all of our conversations about the mineral sector, we are only talking pretty much about the metals and gemstones that are exported in terms of that making up the mineral sector. Whereas, in fact, every country in Africa has a very important part of the mineral sector that are development minerals. So it's not just the Ghanas and the Zambias, etc., that should be focusing on this particular issue. It's all countries, because these commodities are needed for the domestic development of those economies.
All right, thank you very much, Daniels, for that particular discussion right there on the role of minerals, development minerals that are very, very key. And clearly that has told us that there are lots and lots of development minerals that have been mined. Like he said, they cannot be able, probably in just a year, development minerals mined cannot fit in 10 Olympic-size swimming pools. But when we look at some other minerals like gold, the size is small, but then also we'll be talking about the revenues. Where exactly have they gone? There's been quite a lot of illicit trade in Africa, but we'll talk about mineral governance right here. But let me first of all, get joined by Nelson, who is the Geological and Minerals Information Systems expert at MADI, who will be letting us in on the Africa's push for industrialization using these resources. Is Africa ready to harness a technology advancement? Because remember, Isabel looked at capitalizing on these capabilities that also include infrastructural development. Daniels, would you seek to answer this question in about 3 minutes or so? Nelson, rather, sorry. Nelson, can you hear me? Okay, I will get joined. All right, Nelson, go right ahead. Nelson, we're asking about Africa's readiness to actually go ahead and harness technological advancement and innovation with regard to the mining sector or the mineral sector. All right, I'm not.
All right, can you hear me now?
All right, yes, go ahead, I can hear you.
Good afternoon, can you hear me now?
I'm able to hear you, Nelson, go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Namibia. I'm Nelson Chelos. I'm one of the management members for MADI. Yeah, I'm hearing some background sounds, but that's fine. So my topic is on whether we are ready for fourth industrial revolution, and I think the simple answer is really that in my understanding, I think we are. I mean, that's why we are doing what we are doing now, where we are connecting different stakeholders and speakers from various corners of the world. So that is already a tick for us. However, there is still some work to be done in terms of perhaps generating the data that shows us that each corner of the continent is to this extent ready in terms of implementing the elements that come with fourth solution. I mean, you are speaking about smart technologies, smart equipments, smart people, and all this, for the sake of improving our production, for the sake of improving safety in the mineral sector, for the sake of improving, the profits. and all that. And we can't really say we are ready with confidence until we have such a report that paints, the situation in Africa. So I have recommendations that I have perhaps proposed that we as MADI will take on. I think as not post-COVID, but obviously post this event. And some of those is really to see how we can engage various countries to, map the status, the current status when it comes to technology, and how we can improve the mineral sectors in that regard, and then perhaps use that, because different environments will obviously require different input. If you look at how your minerals are, perhaps some are at depth, some are more on surface, so the technology is not the same. So that map for each and every country will definitely help us to perhaps propose a much better way forward. But I'm convinced that we are ready. We have the smart people, and all these technologies are driven by smart people. So as MADI, we are actually looking at these individuals who are perhaps going to help us, to realize this dream. But other than that, so obviously we have to take on board as well our communities. So we have to raise awareness about these technologies. Some communities are still worried, so there is still so much work to do. But that we can only do once we have a clear map of the entire continent, and obviously the situations in each of those parts. I think in short, that's really my contribution, that we need to do a detailed analysis of the situation, come up with the data, because without a proper database, we can't make concrete decisions on the way forward. Thank you very much.
All right, Nathan, maybe just before I let you go, one would say that having such an engagement with the technology has been a wake-up call, probably from COVID-19, because of social distancing and people having not to meet together. Do you think we have developed enough potential as various African countries in terms of even the internet backbone, the infrastructure itself, to ensure that all this can be harnessed well?
I didn't get the question quite well, but I picked up infrastructure and perhaps data collection and related. Obviously, one of the challenges we have right now is infrastructure. To help us connect and with each other, and obviously, for us to develop all these applications and whatnot. If I'm off, please forgive me, I can't really hear well, but the point is, I think the discussion should also be around how we can use some of the resources. All these computers, mobiles, phones, and so on are from actually resources which we have, rare earth elements, you name them. So we have to get on the table and discuss how we can be part of some of those resources, and how do we benefit from them, translating into the technological machines that we need, so that even on the development side, we know that, we are using our resources for the benefit not only of the, outside world, but for our people as well. But not only understanding that, it's our resources, but basically also understanding how everything is changed into, value addition to all these applications that we need to be able to advance life, in various parts of the continent. Like I said, I didn't quite well get the questions, but I hope that has covered some of the areas.
All right, thank you very much, Nelson. Yeah, you've covered some of the areas, and that's the more reason why we need to invest more in technology, because sometimes it can get a little bit disturbing. But thank you very much. Nelson says we are ready a bit with the technological advancement, and there is just a few issues that need to be dealt with. For example, when it comes to internet bandwidth, when it comes to the pricing. I know of so many African countries that have continuously complained about access to internet, but also the pricing of internet. We are continuing to engage a number of other speakers that are joining us from away from the command center where we are right now. But as we get to them, Mr. Mjenyi, I would like us to discuss some of the complex issues of the mining sector. We've had illicit cash flows, we've had illicit trade that is happening. When it comes to aspects like oil, there is always the terminology of the oil curse. So we may also have a resource curse in this case. How do we bring in the discussion surrounding private-public partnerships to solve some of these complex issues? And I'd also like Vincent to come through on the government side and how the public engages there.
Thank you, Mildred. And I want to say that the resource curse is not only in petroleum, it's actually, because petroleum is also a mineral, so it's the resource curse is for all minerals, where it's a paradox that we have not benefited from our resources. But let me put it to the context in which you have brought in the question. Illicit flows. Forget about the minerals that are being traded without our knowledge, because we don't know, we don't have the information, our geological information, because we don't invest in it, so we don't know how much we have. So a lot of minerals, not only gold, but others, there is rare earth minerals that we don't know. We have had our hills, extracted looking for aggregate stones, but we don't know what other minerals may have found there. Nobody did any tests find out if this hill was crushed and they crushed these stones into aggregate stones, which are also minerals. But what other minerals did we lose? But in terms of the calculated illicit financial flows from the continent, it's actually, the figures goes to $100 billion lost from Africa annually. 70% of that is in what is called extractive industries. The rest is out. In terms of contribution, they always say, the studies that was done under the leadership of Thabo Mbeki, they said that 9% of that illicit financial flows is contributed to by corruption and corruption tendencies within African public sector. But, and that's why it is very crucial, because we as Africans, every time you are compromised, you actually are letting out more. So if you are compromised by 1%, 10% is going out, because someone they will come and take everything because you have already been compromised. So 9%, 10% of corruption breeds 70% of illicit financial flows. We lost almost 70 billion annually through from extractive industries, and this is basically because there is no harmonization. Everybody is talking about this, and Jennifer alluded to the fact that you cannot have, as of now, a whole integrated value chain in the country, even when we talk about value addition. You need cross-border, you need regional value chains. You need to ensure that countries need to sit down. But before you sit down, you need to have to invest in geological information. When you talk about science and technology that Nelson has been talking about, drones are being flown to collect data. In our continent, we have drones that we don't own, that are being flown to collect the data. Where does it go? And we can also do better in terms of putting technology and knowing what we have, because you need to first know what you have. So in terms of controlling the sector and benefiting from the sector, we need to really go back and rethink. And earlier on, Jennifer alluded to the fact that the Ugandan Geological Survey is 100 years old. It was 100 years old last year. But I want to let you know that the first highly paid civil servant in Uganda was the first Geological Survey director during the colonial time. He was the highest paid civil servant in Uganda at the time. Now, when you look at that, and today that our geological surveys are left alone to sell maps, they are not serviced by the fiscal sector. We don't have information. And what Jennifer alluded to yesterday, to say 1 in 5,000 projects in exploration brings in money. But we have African countries have departments. We have geological departments. We have other land departments. We sink bowls for water. The technology that sinks to look for water is the same technology that you can use to sink and look for your minerals. So why don't we invest in exploration? Most countries have invested in geological survey, aerial survey, airborne survey, but have not gone further to support the private sector, bring out that information. If you sit in a room with the private sector negotiating those contracts that Vincent talked about, you have those challenges. And one of the other challenges we have that we need to look at is skills. And I think we will have to look at that. The fact that we don't negotiate prudent contracts is because our skills are lacking. You go to legal, all our lawyers in university, none of the universities in Africa is actually having a course on mining law. Nobody knows about mining law. Wow. Actually, the universities from Australia tell you that you have 50 steps in negotiating contracts. You need a lawyer who understands the mining law. But we have customary law, we have marriage laws and those. But
have we informed government of this lack and need that we can at least now focus that, well, we don't have these people with the mining law ideas, but can we focus our education, and just like we are having so many people going to study about petroleum?
Absolutely. That's where now governments in Africa need to focus on. We need to, we have, at the African Union, we have been having a project with the African Legal Support Facility called African Minerals Legislative Atlas, where we have been picking young law students from universities and taking them to introduce them to mining law, so that when they come back, you have a pool of expertise that a country can rely on to sit down. A company will bring a lawyer whom they pay very well, and a country will rely on a lawyer. They'll pay, salary. I don't know how much Ugandan lawyer is paid. In other countries, it could be $100 a month. But that lawyer from the private company is earning much more than that. And we always say that the companies have more money, but we lose more by not negotiating better. So if you pay your lawyer better, he will negotiate better, and you will still achieve, because the $60,000 paid by the private company to the lawyer is going to be got from your own mineral resources.
Before we go to Stefan from Ghana, Frank, you also talked about the existence of drones drawing information that do not belong to us. That was very mind-blowing. Could you just expound a bit more on that? What's the problem?
The problem is because African countries yearn for geological information to conduct the geological survey. They want to get the information to attract in FDI. So you call in someone to come and you want to collect data. There are two options that you are going to use, and Ked will tell you. It's airborne, which is flown by helicopters and so forth, and planes. But the new technology that has come on board, the others are using drones to collect that information. So we have young people who can actually, like Nelson said, who can actually be smart and do these drones. Rwanda is flying drones for supplying, dropping medicines. So why can't we as a country have these drones flying around, collecting our own information?
That's very true.
And also a small point I wanted to make regarding cross-border. There is a lot of need to harmonize and work together in generating that information as countries on homogeneous minerals that you share borders with, in order to know how to plan better.
Keddy, just before we go to the next speaker, I would like you to highlight more on the mineral resource governance, those CASs, and how we can be able to deal with them.
Thank you very much, Wilfred. Earlier on asked me to actually comment on the issue of illicit financial flows.
Part of those.
Which he expounded extremely. I just wanted to emphasize that what he maybe possibly left out is what African governments need to do to try to limit these illicit financial flows. And for the case of Uganda, we have now an authority under the Ministry of Finance called the Financial Intelligence Authority. So all agencies of government are working with this particular agency to try to plug the hole in illicit financial flows. I thought I should mention something that Frank said about geoinformation. I wanted just to correct you that Uganda is one of the countries that has pioneered in acquisition of very high-resolution geological data. Actually, we have very high-resolution data for 80% of the country. And now we even have remaining only Karamoja region, for which we have already signed a contract, and the contractor will be on the ground soon. So Uganda is pioneering in that, and many of the African countries are actually benchmarking from Uganda. Another thing that you talked about is the mining law, the capacity of African lawyers to negotiate. I wanted to say in Uganda, at least now, that capacity, that gap was there, but we are trying to plug it. You recall when I said earlier on that these are some of the things we call transformation of the sector. Many of the lawyers who are involved in drafting of the new bill have actually gone through this. Actually, they're also leaders in the African model law. And so we have even the private practice now. Uganda has actually some lawyers who are now very good in mining law. So the capacity is now being built. Thank you.
Okay, I think that would do us very, very good. If we're building capacity much more, would you like to comment, Jennifer, also on the mineral resource governance and how the public-private partnerships can actually be able to enhance that?
I think in terms of governance, I did want to make a comment about negotiated agreements and when they're applied in different countries in Africa and different countries globally. If we look at the time it's taken, say, in the oil sector to negotiate agreements, these are big projects that'll last for decades. It makes sense. But you wouldn't, for instance, go and apply and get a driving permit and then negotiate the terms of the driving permit if you wanted a driver's license. So we do have to understand that there's going to be, say, artisanal projects, small, medium, large, and very large projects. And presumably, and in most laws, the steps taken to get licensed are clear-cut, very specific written terms and steps and requirements, say, to get a license. Because it doesn't make sense for the government to spend time negotiating a driving permit. You're talking about big projects, right? Yeah. So it's good to be clear on that. And I think in some countries, too, it's important to know that reducing what can be negotiated is helpful. To know what exactly is negotiable, and having transparency in terms of what's negotiable is important. Okay. So in terms of resource governance internationally and in Africa, one of the big shifts, especially for large companies, is about transparency, including fiscal transparency, and it's required by many stock exchanges and international bodies now. It's key. And then we have Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which is also helpful because it looks at what government was paid and for what by companies. But the next step is actually looking at how governments use those monies that were paid. So there's a lot being done in terms of anti-corruption and addressing these fiscal issues in terms of, which I think is important to highlight.
Well, thank you very much. And joining us from Ghana as we continue with this discussion, and like I said, you can use the hashtag MADI E Conference 2020, talking about Africa's mineral sector, where we are, where we've been, where we are, and where we want to go. We are endowed, but we're not taking great advantage of that. I now want to connect to Dr. Stephen Yubo, who is the CEO Commodity Monitor, who will be letting us in on the trends in commodity trade during the and post-COVID-19 period, and how Africa can reposition itself. Like Jennifer said, there have been lots of...
But without them actually accessing technology, accessing finance, being licensed properly, then even formalization in the cooperatives won't benefit. But if you do focus on them, in all sectors, from gold to platinum to the other cement and whatever we talked, sand and the rest, and Jennifer said yesterday, you can actually create more jobs, more employment through artisanal small-scale mining than actually you can create in big mining companies, like Gemma said earlier on.
Okay.
So that's fine.
Well,
but we'll know more in the next tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow,
and,
yes.
I want to thank the whole participants and speakers for having tuned in.
Yes, thank you so much. And in Uganda, when we talk about formalization, someone out there is thinking, oh, government wants taxes. Sometimes it's not just that. It is also being able to give you the services that you need. Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you to Vincent. Thank you, Jennifer. This discussion is going to continue. The hashtag is MADI E Conference 2020 as we talk about Africa's potential in the mining sector. Where are we? Can we take advantage of these God-given resources that we do have across the different African countries? This discussion does continue tomorrow at the same time. We'll be starting off at 2 p.m. as we continue continue with the discussion to ensure that Africa does gain from what it has that is God-given and ensure that this does trickle down into development. I remain Mildred Tohaise. Up next, we'll have, of course, the 2021 updates coming through for you to get to know what's happening on the political scene. It's the Political Command Center. Have a very good evening for now.